Hi, and welcome to the FutureNow talks. Today we're going to talk about cloud and DevSecOps, and I'm joined by Chris Sin, who's the Senior Solution Architect in Help AG, specifically focusing on around cloud, how to secure cloud, and then of course also securing those applications that we're building inside of the cloud. There's a quite interesting development happening when I talk to clients about cloud. Just a couple of years ago, we kind of had two different clients. We had the clients that were, taking their baby steps into the cloud environment, and then we had the ones that were looking at cloud but saying, that's not really for us. But it has developed a lot in the sense that every single client that I talk to today, they are either already in the cloud or they are taking very big steps to move into the cloud. And the ones that are not necessarily looking at public cloud, they're starting to think about how do they use some of the capabilities that we get out of cloud technology inside of their own environments. And that's something we work with a lot of clients around. So Chris, some of the benefits that is for an organization to think about cloud, even in a private cloud setting, can you maybe cover that?
The most important thing to think about here is that every single digital transformation strategy involves cloud in some way, shape, or form. It might be a private cloud on-prem, it might be one of the hyperscalers that we're deploying into. But in every case, it's generally the same goals, right? We're looking for cost optimization, we're looking for increased performance, we're looking for elasticity, more resilience, etc. And it shouldn't matter to us where that cloud is running, whether it's hyperscale, on-prem, etc. The technology today supports it. And it's so important that we understand how we can best leverage it. We can have a look at things like software as a service, where you pay for a particular service every month, you consume it, and really all you need to worry about is the data that you're storing in it. Or we could look at the other side of things, where we're running a full workload in an AWS or in Azure. And ultimately there, we've got a lot more responsibility, but the benefits should still be a lot higher than what they were on-prem.
Absolutely. I think even from a security perspective, you get better capabilities with cloud. And that's something that we're going to talk a little bit about, because in Help AG, we of course focus on the security side of cloud deployments. What are some of the mistakes that you see when we talk to customers about security in cloud?
Well, the biggest mistake is always that they assume that the cloud is secure by default. And that's not necessarily the case. It's important for us to remember that the shared responsibility model ultimately guides how security is deployed. The cloud providers are responsible for security of the cloud, and we as customers and consumers, we're responsible for security in the cloud. And that goes for every piece of workload or every piece of data, and we've got to secure that. So step one is absolutely, customers need to understand that when you move to the cloud, it's super easy. Credit card, email address, you're good to go. But you have to think about security on day one, or day zero really. You need to think about that in the planning phases.
It also gives us some benefits because of the way that we change how we think about applications when we move them into a cloud environment, whether that is on-prem or in a public cloud environment. That's what we typically put under the umbrella of this terminology called DevSecOps. And what is DevSecOps, Chris?
DevSecOps is really a continuation of the DevOps journey. And the DevOps journey was created to achieve business agility. So it's the merging of your development teams, your operations teams, and your security teams to ensure that you've got this uniform approach to how do you deploy or develop and deploy software, essentially.
One thing that was always interesting was that when a customer came to us and said, we've built this new application, can you please secure it? And security became this showstopper, right? Because it had to be secure, where DevSecOps is really about making sure that that's an ongoing process, so that when you get down to the line where you have a finished software application, that you do not have to worry about security being incorporated at that point of time.
Yeah, and in fact, Nikolai, I'd like to add on to that. One of the things about DevSecOps is it's often looked at purely from a developer's perspective. But the other aspect around DevSecOps is how do we empower security teams to ultimately ensure that, as you say, they're not a stumbling block. They're not a showstopper at the end of the process. They're incorporated through the process to ensure those business results actually are realized.
You talked a little bit about how security is a day zero job in a cloud environment. Well, what does that actually mean to you?
Step one, when you start thinking about the cloud, start thinking about the security as well, right? Understand the workloads that you're looking at and essentially have a look at 4 core pillars. You want to look at data security, you want to look at network security, workload security, and identity security. And you've got to be mindful of those 4 aspects regardless of the cloud service you're using. It's the planning more than anything else. If we start off on that good foot, it can only get better from there. But let's not forget the deployment process. Let's not forget about the runtime in the cloud. How do we actually monitor that cloud environment? How do we retrieve the signals that are taking place in that cloud, pull them through to a SOC, for example, and analyze them to understand anomalous behavior?
I know that you do a lot of assessments of customer environments, and it's one of the services that we actively take to market is to look at customers' cloud environment from a security perspective. What are some of the examples that you see out there?
I did a cloud assessment recently for a cloud native organization, and what they essentially did is they created their full cloud workload capability. They deployed their services into the cloud. A very developer-focused organization, so they had many user accounts. We connected up our tools, we ran some assessments, and we had 290,000 vulnerabilities discovered. I mean, understandably, the customer completely fell over. We did too. I've never seen a cloud environment, that riddled with holes. And it was through innocent mistakes. It was really about giving developers more access rights than what they needed. It was about deployment that didn't think about how do we secure things correctly. It was about direct default access to the internet. And through a few small changes from an architectural perspective and through a few good policies, we were able to whittle that completely down.
Here at the FutureNow talks, we have a few ongoing themes and questions that we ask anyone who's on the show. And one of them is really, since we're talking about the future, which kind of technology would you take from the future into today?
I'd love to see where AI is going. Of course, it's as much as cloud has changed the way that IT operates, AI promises to do the same. I mean, we see a lot of that today with things like ChatGPT, and as exciting as it is, it's just as scary. I mean, guys can go onto ChatGPT with little to no experience and request source code, that could create malwares, for example. But I'd like to see where this goes. I'd like to, look into the future and see the AI that's delivered tomorrow.
Another thing is, of course, what we want to preserve from our current environment in the future. And do you have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that's been incredibly successful over the last few years has been the open source movement. It's been incredibly successful both from a business results perspective, but as well as a security maturity perspective. Very often open source code is more honest, open, auditable. I'd like to try and see that move forward. I'd like that approach of communities coming together to deliver business results for the love of it and for the interest of ensuring that we leave the world behind us a safer, more capable place.
Yeah, I think both you and I are old enough to remember the times where we talked about open source as being a security vulnerability. And we're far beyond that conversation now because it's so quick to identify vulnerabilities in open source. And as long as you have your software development process correctly around it, right, you can really build secure applications on open source as well. So, Chris, thank you very much for spending time with us here today. And to you that's sitting out there and watching this little video, I want to thank you for your time as well. Here in E& Enterprise, we of course focus on the cybersecurity part in Help AG around cloud environments, but I'm also lucky enough to be part of an organization which has a dedicated cloud team that is focusing on how do they deliver cloud solutions for clients, whether that is from the software that they're running on the cloud environment to the actual cloud infrastructure itself, either in public or private cloud environments. So in E& Enterprise, we have great capabilities when it comes to cloud. And if you haven't talked to us about it yet, I really urge you to reach out and talk to your account manager about it. So thank you very much for your time.